Welcome, everybody, to a really super special edition of Indie Reads Aloud Radio. We are going to have a blast today. This is a super fun, amazing, off the wall kind of event because we're doing a virtual book launch today. Our owl Fink, my friend Ruby Fink, is here today, and she is launching a new book, which is book 3 in a series. And this book is called Connections in Chemistry. This is the Mickey McKinney Boy Detective series. Ruby, I'm so glad you're back. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for letting me be on your show once again.
Oh, it's so much fun to have you. I love your writing. And this is a really special event for me because we get to do a little bit of extra stuff, which is super indulgent for the 9-year-old that lives inside me. So I'm going to have a good time. We're going to do a little bit of question and answer, and we're going to do a little bit of, we had an art contest, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. Anybody who's watching on YouTube, definitely stick around because we're going to show you some really cool art. Those of you who are listening on Spotify and Anchor, stick around anyway because we're going to have great conversation. And Ruby, you're going to read a little bit for us a little bit later, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So let's start out with the most obvious question. You're an author. You're an author of this really spectacular middle grade detective series. This is a two-pronged question. The first part is, what made you become an author? And the second part is, why a boy detective?
Okay, so the first part is relatively easy. I've always been a writer. I have very faint but also strong memories of being somewhere between 5 and 6 years old and having a story in my head, not having the writing skills able to write it out. So I remember going downstairs and just pestering my mom to write out what I was dictating to her, and being a little bit frustrated that she wasn't writing fast enough to keep up with what I was saying. So, yeah, I've always been a writer. I haven't been a particularly good writer through the early parts of my life, but I knew it was something that I enjoyed and something I wanted to get better at, so I kept honing my craft.
I love the fact that you thought your mother was your own personal built-in stenographer. That's just, that's fantastic.
I mean, only option available to me at the
time. How did your mom take that?
Well,
was she okay with that role?
I mean, she definitely wanted to clarify certain parts of the story. I believe it was a princess story, and she wanted to know different details about the princess. And I was like, Mom, don't focus on that right now. We got to get to the fact that the princess is going to the castle.
That's awesome. So even at a young age, you had a sense of story.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So why a boy detective? You could have written about a unicorn detective. Why a boy detective?
I could have written about a unicorn detective. Maybe next time I will. I did the boy detective particularly. I think it was mostly due to the fact that I grew up reading a whole bunch of boy detective stories. So I loved the Hardy Boys. I loved Encyclopedia Brown. That is a favorite staple of my childhood. Dad would read to us, and we'd have to try and figure out all the clues, and then we'd skim to the end. And if we all had our answers to who it could possibly be, only then could we find out the thing. So I really wanted to sort of do an homage to that. But I once the character was developed, because a lot of people said, why don't you do a girl detective? After all, you're a girl, you should write about a girl detective. And I couldn't, because Mickey had been fully formed. He was a walking, talking person at that point. And making him a girl just so others might possibly read my story, it didn't seem quite ethical to the character. I couldn't change him just so others would like him.
I love that you listen to the voice rather than listen to the outside pressure, because that's where we get our great stories from, is from that internal voice. So I'm really glad that you stayed authentic to that.
Yeah, and I'm also a little glad I listened to him, because he's been going around in my head for years, and finally had to write him out as a novel, because he's been a podcast, and we did the audio thing for a while, and a lot of people enjoyed the stories, but not enough people enjoyed it. So I wanted to try the novel, and he kept saying, "Hey, why don't you try this? Hey, why don't you try this?" Hey, so I had to do it.
It's
Just to
fun
get
to
it.
have a middle grade boy knocking on your head. That's
Yeah,
sounds like a good
yeah.
thing. So, do you think if you were 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, do you think that you and Mickey would be friends?
Oh, I hope we would be friends, because he has so many fun adventures, and he sees the world in such a unique way. I'd have to be friends with him just to keep school interesting. I really would.
What's your favorite character trait about him?
Um, well, there are a couple. The candy thing for sure is something that I identify with, and that's why I gave it to him, because when I was little, my mom would bring home a jar of jelly beans, and she told me that was how she got paid, and I just thought that was the coolest job ever if I got
Yeah.
paid in candy. So I wrote
Yeah.
it into the story, and his sweet tooth is very much my sweet tooth. You can wave a cookie in front of me, I will be distracted for a little bit until I finish that. Um,
Yeah, I'm the same way with chocolate chip cookies. Just don't. Yeah.
yeah, so good. Can't stop it. I
Yep.
loved inventing sweets. I loved making new things, especially because I have a lactose intolerance and a gluten allergy. I gotta make sweets that I can enjoy.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
There's some creativity there. I also liked Mickey's heart, and I liked that he's willing to stand up for his friends.
Mm.
I remember when I was little, I was very shy, and I would sometimes see people bullied, and I would try and stand up for them. I don't think I made a difference too much. I hope I made a little bit of a difference, but sometimes it felt like it was useless. So I really wanted to create a character who saw that there were things around him that he didn't like and that were unfair, and that he actively did something to make it better.
That's a really great model for young kids
Yeah,
to give them that insight that if they see an injustice, they can still stand up and say something about it, even though they're young.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
then they can take that into adulthood. Now, here's the really challenging question.
Hmm.
We all write characters that we love for various reasons, and
Hmm.
you just talked about why you love Mickey.
Hmm.
What's something about Mickey that you don't like? Because as authors, we all know that our characters have to be
Hmm.
three-dimensional.
Yeah.
They can't always be unicorns and rainbows. There have to be
Yeah.
some darker sides to our characters, even the good guys.
Hmm.
So what would you say would be a darker side to Mickey?
Darker side to Mickey. Well, the thing that he has that I also have is that he gets stuck in his head, and he keeps telling himself the story that he has to do this alone. Nobody likes him. He's the kid with the weird hat, and that
So
he,
he has those internal self-esteem issues.
yeah, he has the internal self-esteem issues. He kind of self ostracizes himself. Thinks of himself as standing as apart from everyone else, which also doesn't allow him to be friends with a lot of people,
Right.
um, because he just thinks of himself as someone that doesn't belong. And
So during the course of these three books, and the
mhm,
first one is The Case of the Absent Answers,
yeah,
and the second is Trouble with Teamwork.
yeah,
Now you've written three books. You're
mhm,
well embedded into this world, and you know these characters really well.
yeah.
So why do you find that these characters are attracted to each other? What's that commonality that
Mhm.
they share?
One thing that they definitely all share is that they're kind of unique, and you've got a kind of crazy girl genius who's just smarter than everyone else in the room, and so she goes off and she does her own thing most of the time. You've got a kid who thinks of himself as a boy detective, and that's something that most kids don't. And then you've got a army brat who's very tough. She's kind of sarcastic a lot. She puts up all these walls, so nobody really wants to be friends with her because they're so scared of her. So I think the thing that they all have in common is that um, they all understand what it feels like to be on the outside. They've also all understand what it's like to lose someone. Sam lost her big brother, Berners lost her grandmother, and Mickey lost his dad. So, and that's something that not a lot of kids at an early age have to deal with.
Sure. Yeah.
So having someone who understands what it's like to lose someone and clinging to the memories they have, is something that they can all share, and I think that's what bonds them the most.
That's a really wonderful character trait that that you allow these characters to engage on that level.
Yeah,
Um, because those are emotions that a lot of adults don't think young children experience.
yeah,
You know, for some reason, there's something in our head that says, oh, you're too little, you don't understand.
no, they
But
absolutely
my
do.
experience has been that these little kids really do understand. They
Mhm,
understand more than we think.
yeah,
So I think it's really heartwarming that you have found this group of misfits and
mhm,
somehow brought them together.
yeah.
I think that's a great thing. Out of all of these characters, which one is your favorite?
Oh, I was dreading this question. Oh, they're all fun and they all have little bits of me inside, but honestly, I think Burners is the most fun. Mostly because I get to do the craziest stuff with her and I get to get away with the craziest stuff with her because she's a genius, which means that she can build a bizarre and crazy explosive, or she can hack into the school's computer, or she can just throw a hissy fit that Mickey broke something again. I mean, there's so much fun stuff that I can make her do, and because she's kind of crazy and she's all over the place, people will suspend their disbelief a lot more when she does various things.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I think it's really interesting, and I think this is an interesting point for young writers to
Mhm.
take in, and that is your main character doesn't always have to be the author's favorite.
No. No.
Sometimes it's a background character or maybe a sidekick that is the author's favorite. So
Yeah.
just because we're writing about Mickey doesn't necessarily mean that he has to steal the show, which
No.
I love that you allow yourself to do
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, honestly, every time Burners is in the room, it just makes it that much more bizarre and
Yeah,
fun, and
sure.
Mickey has his moments where he's serious. Sam has her moments where she's scary and intense. Burners is just always a fun, bizarre party every time.
So what part of your real life has seeped into these books? Because we all, you know, there's an old adage that says write what you know.
Mhm.
And all of us do that to a certain degree. We can't help but do it. You know,
Yeah.
and one of the novels that I wrote, main character drinks hot cocoa. Why?
Mhm.
Because, well, that's a main staple of my existence.
Yes.
It was hard not to write that into the book. So, what parts of your real life
Mhm.
have made their way into this series?
Okay. Well, the detective stuff definitely came from my childhood, reading with dad, and just solving all those little puzzles. Also, just the bizarre outfits. I definitely was a theater kid. I loved dressing up and putting on costumes. And then the being paid in candies, definitely part of my life and my childhood. And I mentioned it, so I won't go too much of it. That's Mickey. Then Sam, who's the martial artist, I did karate when I was growing up, started at 9, went all the way up to 13. I had my black belt. So I understood that part, and that definitely seeped into Sam's character as well. I wanted her to be tough and strong, and I also kind of knew what that was like, so I wanted a little bit of that in her as well. And then
Mhm.
Burners, I don't like to follow directions when it comes to experiments. And that's definitely the Burners in me that has seeped into her as well. She's a kid, she's creative, and because she's not a adult yet, she doesn't know her limitations, and she will experiment and she'll cause explosions. And but she's also curious, and I think there's a little bit of that in Burners and in me as well. So I'd
Very
say
cool.
those all are the seepages.
There really is a lot of you in these stories. That's a
Yeah.
really cool thing, that
Oh
you've been
yeah.
able to, well, and the great thing about writing children's books
Mhm.
is that not only do we get to write parts about ourselves, but we get to change the ending. You know?
Yeah,
So
agreed.
that
It's
kid that maybe bullied us when we were little, we now get to win over them.
Tommy is someone that bullied me, and I got the greatest satisfaction in having Sam beat him up. So
Exactly. It's
awesome.
writing is a wonderful way of getting revenge without going to jail,
Yep,
right? You know?
for sure.
um, so let's shift gears a little bit here. You also write for adults or for
Mhm.
older readers.
Yes.
How is it different to write for a young audience versus an older audience?
Well, I get to be a little more creative when I'm working on writing kids' books. I like to suspend disbelief a little bit more, and do crazy stuff for sure. Um, and when I'm writing adult books, it's usually centered more in the realistic, and because I do ghostwriting a lot, I often have to do books that are empowering. So think more along the lines of Eat, Pray, Love. It's not supposed to be silly and bizarre. It's just supposed to be a woman finding herself on a journey.
Sure.
So yeah, kids' books, I get to be more creative. I get to use my imagination more and kind of think outside the box and have fun with it.
So when you're sitting down to write a book, this is the classic question in writer circles, right? Are you a pantser or a plotter? Pantsers are those writers who write off the cuff, by the seat of their pants. They write it
Mhm.
as it comes, and then they worry about editing later.
Right.
Um, Plotters are those people like myself who sit
Mhm.
down with an outline
Mhm.
and have a more specific understanding
Uh,
of how the story is going to go. So,
mhm.
what are you, a pantser, a plotter, or are you somewhere in between?
I'm definitely somewhere in between. There are a lot of times when I have an outline that I follow, and then other times the characters are like, "Hey, let's do something fun," and they just go off in a little tangent off to the side, and I kind of have to keep up with what they're doing, and it often changes the story in the most interesting ways. And then there are other times where I stick to the outline all the way through, and it really depends on the story, and it depends on the voices in my head.
So I saw another writer talking about this, and they posted a meme on social media that was essentially, um, uh, I don't dictate the story. I simply
Mhm.
listen to the character and write up incident reports.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I
I,
do that
I
a lot.
I find that happens for me a lot as well.
Mhm,
Um, so, what was the initial inspiration that you got for Mickey? Where did that little spark of
mhm.
who he finally became? Where did that start?
Ah, well, I'd say it was an amalgam of Encyclopedia Brown, but also, it's, a Canadian writer, Greg Taylor. He does the most amazing, audiobooks ever. I love his work. Um, sort of a combination of that was the homage, but also just, I have an affiliation to Archangel Michael as well, and he's someone that, I've been told by various people, follows around, and just the idea of a little kid who goes around and sort of protects and takes care of others, that was kind of where Mickey came from in the
That's
first
very
place,
cool.
and yeah, just, I like that idea because I didn't really have anyone to look after me, and it would have been nice for
Yeah,
sure.
sure. Yeah, for all of us, I think.
Agreed.
Um, so when we sit down as authors to create a new story with brand new
Mhm.
people, we most of us really understand the concept of character creation, right? You
Yes.
got to make up these people and you got to have them do
Okay.
things and say things, and how
Mhm.
much sense does it make and how does it track?
Mhm.
But there's an aspect that a lot of writers don't realize the complexity of it, and that's world
Mhm.
building.
Yeah.
So when we talk about world building, it's not just about place, but it's also
Mhm.
about the tenor of the environment.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about not only the place that you drop these characters into, but the kind of environment you wanted them to exist in.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, most of the world exists in the middle school, which is Maple Ridge Middle School, and I'm trying to be very careful and not have them go outside of that place. Just it breaks the boundary a little bit, and because within that world, you've got what is supposed to be everyday stuff. You go to classes, you've got teachers, but I wanted there to be more there, and that's what Mickey sees. So he's got his office, which is just a broom closet, um, and you've got the science lab, which is Berners' territory, and the football field, which is Sam's territory, and in between, you've got classes here and there. But it was supposed to be a middle school, but because it's overshadowed by Mickey's noir aspect,
Mhm.
there's more to it. There's things come out of the shadows, and they interact with Mickey, and little things that are just everyday, like someone loses their homework, happens all the time. Someone can't find their pet, happens all the time. But Mickey actively turns it into a case. Mystery food in the cafeteria turns that into a case. Um, and hi, kitty. Uh, you can sit. Ah.
So talk to me a little bit about the noir aspect of it. You know, noir is
Mhm.
really one of those genres that is uh, particular to adults,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We don't see a lot of. You're only the second author I've ever met who's
Mhm.
written noir for children, which I think
Yeah.
is fantastic. The
Mhm.
other author that I read, she has like a Bogart swagger to her main character, which is super fun to play with.
Mhm.
He's got the language and everything.
Yeah.
So, where did you decide to draw the line
Mhm.
between that idea of a kid's detective book and an adult noir? Like, where did you decide that middle ground was going to be for you?
Ah.
Because there can be some
Mhm.
really tense and at
Mhm.
times violent things that go on in
Yeah.
noir, especially in film.
Yeah.
So, how did you decide where you were going to make that line of demarcation?
So here's the thing. It's going to get a lot darker later on in the series.
Okay.
Because Mickey is going to discover that there is someone in the shadows who is actively keeping the shadows there and trying to make it darker. Um, and one thing I always loved about noir is, and I had to study it in film school because, of course, that's what I did,
Right.
is it kind of stretches and distorts what's actually there, and it adds shadow where shadow shouldn't be, and trying to balance that with a regular middle school experience, I thought would be interesting. And so it I'm definitely trying to almost make fun of the middle school experience by adding the
Right.
noir, and the shadows are going to overreach some of it some of the time. But I also want to make fun of it as well and say, hey, it's still a kid's book. There's little things here and there, and
Sure.
Sam reminds Mickey, hey, we're still in a school. We got to go to history class. We got to go to this thing. We got to go to lunch now. Bell rang. We have to stop this case for a little while. And
I think it's a
oh,
great way
yeah,
of kind of mixing the
yeah.
dream world with the real world.
Agreed, and most of that, because it happens in Mickey's head, the balance is really in him, and then Sam and Berners kind of pull him out of that dream world into the real world.
So, how many books do you plan on having in the series?
I was going to say 20, but
That's
definitely
incredibly ambitious.
some of the books I've written out, I might have to just segment together because I'm not sure how many kids would be willing to deal with a part one and a part two and a part three.
Hmm.
That kind of didn't that worked well for Harry Potter in the movie form, but I think kids would prefer a giant tome to having to wait at a
Yeah.
cliffhanger.
Yeah, I remember when my son read Harry Potter, and
Mhm.
then when he read Lemony Snicket,
Yeah.
comparing the two, he was very happy to sit down and read 450 pages, which in fourth grade, that was fantastic.
Yes.
I'm not going to complain about my son reading 450
Mhm.
pages when he's 10 years old. But then when Lemony Snicket came along in the
Mhm.
series of unfortunate events, that was 13 books.
Yeah.
And what he really wanted at that age was, can't you just give them all to me at once?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's understandable. And I remember reading them, and it's like, oh gosh, bad guy got away again, and now we got to find the next book and read it. And
Right.
there'll be a little bit of that. But yeah, I'm gonna condense some of them, so we might be looking at closer to 13 to 15, give or take. We'll check in and see how I'm doing. Hopefully you'll have me on again. And
Well, of course,
good.
because now we're 3 books in, and if you're going to write 15, that means I've got a lot more story to hear from you. So
Yes.
you will definitely be coming back on the program, no question.
Yeah.
You're not going to leave me hanging on that cliff. Okay, other people might be okay with that, but the 9-year-old in me says, no, you don't get to put me on that ledge.
Good. Let's see if I can hit 15. If I do, we'll bring champagne and we'll pop a cork and go, woohoo!
Perfect. I like that plan.
Yeah.
I'll bring the brownies. You bring the champagne. It'll be a party.
There we go.
So what advice do you have for aspiring writers, whether they be youngsters or adults? I'm sure that there's some advice that would cross the barriers of age. What are some things that you would suggest writers do?
So, a couple things right off the bat is everything you write first time around, it's gonna be awful. I'm just letting you know. And a lot of people, if they are good friends, they're gonna tell you it's awful, and those are the ones you should probably listen to. Writing is also not just something you can do as a hobby. If you take pride in your work, you should find where you need to improve and work on that, because it doesn't matter. Sometimes you're going to have to put your ego aside and look at your story and say, all right, so I might need to fix this. I might need to fix this. I might need to strengthen this. And in doing so, you'll become better. If you decide, no, I'm going to keep everything perfect the way it is, and I don't care if people say there are typos in this, I'm going to publish this because I believe it's brilliant. No. Take pride in your work. Find people who can be honest with you and help it improve, and stick by those people. I have a couple friends who will always be honest with me and show where it needs improvement. Those are my best friends. There are also
Absolutely.
people who will just tell me the book is amazing. That doesn't really help during the writing process. They can read your book later, they can be a fan, but you're gonna need some people who will be honest and tell you what you need to know in order to make it better. I think the biggest advice I can give is you're gonna have to grow a bit of a tough skin as well, because you're going to receive a lot of rejection. Whether you decide to indie publish, traditional publish, you're going to face a lot of rejection. You're going to face people who don't like your work. That's okay. For every person I found that didn't like my work, I found about 10 that did.
Yeah,
So
right.
it might take some time. Also, developing your book is not supposed to be a sprint. It's supposed to be a marathon. So you are not going to become an instant success. You're just not. Learn to be patient, learn to plant little seeds and get your work out there in small ways. Find people who genuinely like your work and are your fans, and they will tell other people that you like it, and they will help you grow as well.
Yeah, I think it was Neil Gaiman. I heard him speak once, and I think it was him who said that overnight successes take 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen as fast as you think it will.
No.
So for the last question of our wonderful little interview here,
Mhm.
This has been so much fun. I've really
Aw.
enjoyed this conversation. One of my favorite things in the world is to talk to authors, so this is
Mhm.
completely indulgent for me.
Oh, good.
But the last question I have for you is, what did you find to be the hardest part of your particular writing journey? Each one of us has
Mhm.
areas that we stumble in.
Mhm.
What for you is the part that gives you the most challenge?
Well, there are so many hard parts. I mean, marketing is its own monster to deal with for
Yeah.
sure, and
Yeah.
promoting yourself. Um, Looking back over the book and trying to find little mistakes here and there. Um,
Which, by the way, you always find
yes.
after you push the
Oh
publish button.
gosh. Yeah, my first book, there are 2 glaring typos. I'm gonna have to go back and fix them at some point. Um, I mean, the hardest part, honestly, was, I know I said that you're not gonna be an overnight success, but I really wanted to be an overnight success. So
Sure.
the
Yeah.
hardest part for me was hitting the publish button and getting a couple people who genuinely liked it, but I wanted so many more people to like it. I was like, I did all this work and nothing. So I guess the hardest part was putting aside my ego, and I still struggle with it day to day. I still want to be an overnight success.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Patience is so difficult.
yeah. Um, and I'd say, yeah, wanting to be successful, wanting your books to make a lot of money, trying to fight with that imposter syndrome that says you're not a good writer, you're not a good writer, you're not a good writer. Um, all of those are definitely hard for me. But what balances it out is you get really good days when a whole classroom full of kids send you artwork.
Sure.
Um,
Right. Yeah, that's an awesome day.
yeah.
And I think that's a perfect segue into
Mhm,
the next part of our program today, and that is we put out
mhm,
a call for artists,
yeah,
young artists, to show us their heroes.
mhm,
Um, and I don't think this was so much of an art contest as it was a share your hero
mhm,
experience, right?
yeah,
Um, but it was super, super fun to see all of the amazing artwork that you got back from youngsters.
yeah.
Um,
So hard
I
to
know
do.
that I know that those of you who are listening just on audio, this might be a little frustrating for you, but just bear with us because in just a couple of minutes we're gonna hear Ruby read a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but I really want to share the artwork. So if you
Mhm.
would share your screen and
Sure.
let's
Uh,
show some of this artwork. We'll talk about a little bit of it, and we have 3 prizes that we'll be giving away today
mhm,
in honor of this really wonderful art project that we
yeah.
did.
All right. So it might not look super pretty, but second. Oh, there it is.
Technology is always fun.
It is for sure. All right. So first up, we have. Oh, nope, that's not it. All right. So first up, we have Gertie Corey. I'm sorry, it's going to be a little blurry. Um, which is Delilah's hero, and she is a famous chemist. And first of all, may I just say, I am so impressed that I think she's about 8, 9 years old, and she thinks that a woman chemist is her hero, and she's
I
just like a
think
little bird.
that's I think that's absolutely spectacular that a young person knows the name of a chemist, let alone understands what chemistry is. That just blows me away.
Agreed,
Um,
and the artwork itself is beautiful. I mean, you've got shading here, you've got the proportions all well done. It's just gorgeous.
yeah, absolutely. This is a beautiful. It looks like maybe pencil in
Mhm,
like black and white and shades of gray, and the
yeah,
shading on this is just gorgeous.
yeah,
Um,
agreed.
I am super impressed. Now, Delilah is the winner one of our 3 top prize winners, and she's going to receive a signed copy of the book
Yeah.
and a t-shirt.
Yes, she is.
Super fun. Who is our next art winner?
All right. So next art winner is going to be Sunny. And she decided that Harry Potter was her hero, and I can't really argue with that because who doesn't love Harry Potter?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough argument to make. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a kid who, at a very young age, had a very large responsibility placed onto his shoulders.
Well, not to mention the fact that he had to solve a bunch of puzzles
Yeah.
and figure stuff out while going to school. So
Uh-huh.
it's a pretty remarkable thing. I love this piece of art. I especially love it because the artist did such a great job with getting the skin tone.
Yes.
When I was a child, I know there was a crayon in the box called flesh, but it never looked like flesh to me. So I am super impressed with Sunny's artwork. I think she did a great job. And she will also be taking home an autographed copy of the book and a t-shirt.
Yes, she will. Yeah. All right.
And then our final winner for today?
Final winner is Skylar. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger. There we go.
This is wonderful.
Actually did this on her computer, and that in itself is very impressive because I can't do that at all.
Yeah.
Drawing
with a mouse?
Yes.
Yeah, no.
Her hero is her mom, which I think is super sweet. We actually got quite a few people who said their mom was their hero, and I wanted to give all of them prizes because who doesn't love having their mom as their hero? But this one was just gorgeous, and it really stood out to me.
And I really love the little butterflies in this drawing.
Yeah.
There's a nice delicateness to this artwork that really impresses me because it comes from such a young person.
Yeah.
And that delicacy of the butterfly wings is really cool.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah,
and so Skylar will be getting also an autographed copy of the book and a t-shirt. Do you by chance, I don't know if you do, because we really didn't talk about this, but do you have a compilation of all the artwork that we received?
I can, oops, I'll pull that up actually.
We have that? Because I know you got quite a few submissions.
Yeah.
I was super impressed with how many young people responded to this art contest.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely show the majority.
You know what? Why don't you do this? Why don't you send it to me and we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
And then everybody can see this amazing collection of art, and we'll add those to the show notes. So anybody who wants to go see the winning pieces of art and also all of the runners up, go to the show notes and check that out.
Yeah, I can definitely do that for you.
Awesome. So everybody's been waiting. We've been waiting all throughout the program for this. So we want to hear you read.
Oh, okay. I can do that.
I want to hear a little bit of this story because, oh my gosh, so much fun. And I heard we have 2 other programs that have you reading snippets of book 1, which is the case of the absent answers, and book 2, which is troubles with teamwork. Really super fun to hear you read from those. So I'm really excited to hear you read a little snippet from book 3. Connections in Chemistry, because I want to see if just from these small little bits, if I can hear anything new or different that I should be watching out for in book 4. So when you are ready, will you please take the microphone and read aloud?
Absolutely, can do. All right. Chapter 1. Into Every PI's Life. The name's McKinney. Mickey McKinney. Churchill once said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Oh, sorry, my mistake. That was one of the trick questions on my history test packet. Apparently, George Santanea is the one who said that, while Churchill said, Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Regardless, whether you are doomed or condemned, it is clear that any who do not remember their past should expect it, at some point, to come back and take a bite out of their backside. Not unlike that incident last year when George Williams put half a sandwich in his back pocket and his bulldog, Jaws, attempted to retrieve it. But back to the story at hand. As far as detecting went, the last week had been mundane, bordering on stagnant. Cafeteria food was cooked and served, free of mystery lumps and smells. Homework and personal items remained in their owner's possession. And Sam and I had gone another week without annoying each other, to the point we might have considered dissolving our partnership. It was awful. Don't mistake me. I am aware that into every PI's life a little boredom must fall. But for every day of staring at the door, there should be a day of activity to offset it. Busy days, where clients are lined up outside the door for as far as the eye can see, with cases far outside the confines of mystery food and mystery pets, and solutions to the whodunit that did not end with the janitor did it. So you can imagine my excitement when, on a certain Wednesday afternoon, there was a knock on the dull brown door of my office, and a long pair of legs walked in. "McKinney and Hayes investigations," I said, leaping out of my chair. I stopped, disappointed, when I saw the face that the legs belonged to. "Oh, it's you." "Aw, what's wrong, McGlum?" Sam smirked. "I don't look like a client to you?" Sam Hayes had transferred to Maple Ridge Middle School a month ago, when her parents were stationed at the Army base in my sleepy town of Maple Ridge, Vermont. Tall, blonde, and full of sass, she never stopped reminding me of her superior height and athletic skills. Considering she had a second-degree black belt in both judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I had problems doing even one push-up in gym class, she was right at least one account. Regardless, I still allowed her to help out with whatever case came through the door. Maybe it was because I knew she had the ability to twist me into a square knot if I got on her bad side. Maybe it was because I was a little nutty from all the time I spent sitting in this broom closet, which was actually the office of McKinney and Hayes Investigations. Or maybe it was because, out of all the people in the school, she was one of the few I considered my friend. "You, a client?" I retorted. "Isn't it a little ironic for a detective to be asking another detective for help?" "Call it outsourcing." Sam lounged in the doorway, her usual mud-spattered pants and boots unusually clean for this late in the day. "See, I'm looking for this weird kid in my chemistry class. Brown hair, brown eyes, little guy, puny even. Makes Tom Thumb look like a giant." "Okay, I know where this is going," I tried to interrupt, but she kept talking. "Talks weird, dresses weird, always wearing a hat 50 years out of date, but he's pretty smart. So I agreed to be his lab partner this week." "This fedora is a classic," I started to protest. But then the rest of what she was saying hit me like Tarzan colliding with a tree. "Wait, lab partner?" I asked weakly. "Yeah. So I show up to class early for our science project, and guess who's not there?" Sam gave me her special smile, which made it very clear who was the idiot in question. "Go on. You're the detective." "I can explain," I said, feeling guilty. "Can you explain and walk?" Sam jerked a thumb toward the doorway. "Come on, McSnail. We're already late." She headed out at a brisk pace, and I grabbed my backpack and ran after her, trotting to keep up with her long-legged strides. "So, what happened?" Sam asked. "Lost track of time all daydreaming?" "What?" I tried to appear innocent, even though that was exactly what had happened. "Why would you think that? I was doing homework and other stuff." Sam gave me a look that said she didn't buy it. "Uh-huh. So you worked on our assignment?" "What assignment?" I hadn't really been listening when our teacher gave us our instructions, as I'd just been hired to help with a missing bike case. A detective has priorities. "I thought this was a class project. What were we supposed to do?" "I should have chosen someone else," Sam groaned. "Anybody else. Look." She grabbed my backpack to stop me from going through the door to class. "Just hand me the ingredients and take notes. If you don't touch anything, then maybe we'll live through this. I'm not gonna blow up the lab, I protested. Sam gave me a skeptical look. I probably won't, I conceded. Sam still did not look convinced. You say that, but every time you, test tubes, and burners are in the same room together, something goes wrong. Wait, burners? I asked as Sam opened the door. What does she have to do with all of this? Well, said a familiar nasally voice. Look who finally decided to show up for class. Chapter 2. Bubble, bubble, toil, and... The class looked the same as usual. Posters with the periodic table, different chemical formulas, and a few respected scientists lined the walls. The rest of our chemistry class was already paired up, 2 to each desk, with an assortment of beakers and ingredients between them. Only the person behind the desk was different. Instead of the familiar Dr. Carson with her dyed blonde hair and matronly skirt and sweater set, there was what looked like a mini mad scientist perched on Dr. Carson's stool, wearing her usual protective goggles that magnified her eyes to twice the normal size, an oversized lab coat covered in mystery stains and smudges, and a smile that was too smug for my liking. At 4'0", Jamie Burners Burns was probably the smartest kid in the school, and maybe smarter than some of the teachers. I often wondered why a girl of her intellect was hanging around a backwater school like Maple Ridge Middle School, though I had never pried too hard. I usually went to Burners when I had trouble with a piece of evidence, or my science homework, and I did not want to risk breaking up such a beneficial arrangement. Burners? I asked in disbelief. What are you doing here? Where's the teacher? That's Professor Burners to you, Mr. McKinney, Burners said, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Dr. Carson got a bad bowl of chili and went home early. Principal Morgan wasn't able to find a substitute last minute, and since I'm taking advanced science classes at the local college, I was the most qualified to fill in. Seriously? I asked. Out of all the teachers in the entire school, an 8-year-old girl was the most qualified to teach the chemistry class. An 8-year-old girl genius, Burners corrected, her face wrinkling in annoyance. And I'm not sure I like your attitude, Mr. McKinney. Maybe I should take a few points off your grade. Mickey, Sam protested. The girl could take on half the 8th grade class in a game of touch football without breaking a sweat, but she was a real stickler for rules in the classroom. Sam took her place on the honor roll as a matter of pride, and nothing was allowed to ruin her perfect GPA. What? I reassured her. She's not the real teacher. Ooh, Burners looked vindictive. Maybe more. How's a B+ sound? I'm okay with that, I said. I'm not! Sam was practically wringing her hands in distress. Our argument was cut short by a shriek behind us. Professor, something is wrong with my volcano. The table right behind us was almost completely consumed by bright pink foam, which was spilling over onto the floor at an alarming rate. Oh my God, what is this? A girl with bright red hair squealed. Shouts came from 2 other desks as well. It's happening to mine too! Mine too! Ow! A girl with mousy brown hair and pigtails flinched away from her table. Something burned me! Smoke was now filling the air, and several kids began coughing. Everyone stay calm, Sam's voice rose over the general panic. It's just smoke and foam. Let's get the doors and windows open. Burners stared, thunderstruck, as the classroom in front of her was very quickly filled with pink and green foam. How is this possible? She asked incredulously. The rest of the class was in a similar state of disbelief and panic. Some classmates stood on chairs, while others rushed toward the door in an attempt to avoid the pink mess. The exit quickly became the epicenter of a bottleneck. All right, you jokers, what's going on here? Burners looked around as if expecting someone to raise their hand. No one did. Fine, y'all want to play innocent? Burners scrambled onto Dr. Carson's desk as the foam licked at her shoes. First one to confess gets A+, everyone else gets an F. Again, you can't do that because you're not the teacher, I pointed out. Foam was climbing up on my pant legs, but the only refuge was the desk the mini mad scientist was standing on. I decided I would be safer on the ground. Burners, maybe we should focus on getting everyone out of here, Sam suggested. Good plan, I agreed. We can get some mops and clean up the mess once everyone is safe. Everyone! Sam cupped her hands over her mouth like a megaphone. Form a single file line and leave the classroom one at a time. Forget that, said the girl with red hair. I'm getting out of here before my outfit is ruined. She pushed and shoved at the students in front of the door, and half the class followed suit, creating chaos as everyone fought to get out. Everyone, stay calm! Single file line! Burners shouted, but no one paid attention. More than one student slipped in the foam, taking down anyone near them when they went. In the midst of the confusion, the smoke alarm was tripped, the ceiling sprinklers were activated, and the entire class was deluged by water. What do you think? Like, do one
That
more chapter?
sounds like a great day in science class to me.
Yeah, absolutely does.
How fantastic. Oh my gosh. This is so much fun. What a great I'm so happy you wrote this book because I'm going to have a great time.
Yes.
I am so excited that you have this book coming out. When do you expect book 4 to be available for our enduring eyes?
Well, I'm taking a bit of a financial break because publishing your own book can get expensive, and
Sure.
I am running low on funds.
Sure. Happens to the best of us.
Yeah. Hopefully I will be able to get a new book out before Christmas. If not, definitely in the new year there will be at least 3 more books coming out. So
That's spectacular.
yes.
How much fun. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad we got to share this time today. This was a blast and a half. For anybody who is interested, again, you can find Ruby Fink. She is available on Amazon under the pen name R.L. Fink. And the latest book is Mickey McKinney, Boy Detective Connections in Chemistry. If you liked the little bit that you heard today, please go check out all 3 books in this series. You won't be sorry. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't also remind you, also, because that seems to be the word tonight, also. It's gift giving planning season, and books always make great gifts.
Yes.
So if you know a youngster in your life who might enjoy these stories, they make great gifts. But keep in mind that these books are full of adorable snark. So for those of you younger listeners who don't know what to get your grandparents for Christmas, they would really enjoy these books as well.
Yes.
I'm being a walking commercial because I love your work. And I just think it's spectacular, and I tend to gush when I find a new author that I love. So thank you so much for spending time with us, and I look forward to having you back on the program again to read some more for us.
I look forward to being back. I really do. This is going to be a lot of fun.
It's always fun to talk with you. Again, check out the show notes to see all the amazing artwork. Thanks again, Ruby. I hope you have a wonderful day.
I hope you do too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
All right.